In this video, we're going to create our first program in R. When you've opened RStudio, you can see that it contains a pane called the console, which in the screenshot here is on the left-hand side. This is where we can write and run R code within RStudio. It's sometimes confusing that we have to separately install R as well as RStudio. Technically, if you open R on your computer, you will get this same console. However, it won't be embedded within RStudio, and so it won't come with all the useful tools for writing code that RStudio provides. Therefore, you should always open RStudio whenever you want to write and run any code with R. The top of the console here and in your own RStudio will start with some information about the version of the R programming language that you have installed. This is not too important. You can generally ignore this. And below that, you'll see a greater than symbol with a blinking cursor. We call this the prompt, and this is where we can write any code that we want to run. For example, we could type in 2 plus 2, like you see here. Then we can hit enter, and that sends that line of code to R. R evaluates that code and it sends the output back. And sure enough, we can see that it has correctly interpreted 2 plus 2 as the number 4. The fact that there's little square brackets with a 1 in front of the 4, that just means this is the first number in the output. Well, there's only one number, the number 4, so we don't really need to worry about the square brackets one. Once it's finished running, a new prompt, the little greater than symbol, will appear below the output. That indicates that the previous instruction has finished running, and so now we can type in another line of code if we so desire. We're now ready to write our first computer program. Many years ago, a famous programming textbook was published which had a first program called Hello World, and so now it's something of a tradition to write that as your first program in a new programming language. The Hello World program is very simple. It just outputs the characters, the words hello and world. Instead of showing you an RStudio screenshot with the console, I'm instead just going to show you the line of code that you would type in at the prompt, i.e. after that little angle bracket that we saw on the previous slide. However, you can copy this code over or type it in to RStudio and run it by pressing enter in the console, and you should be able to get the same output that I'm going to show you here. The first thing to note is that we have this word print. This is called a function. We'll talk more about those later. And it's immediately followed by an opening bracket. And then at the end of the line, we have a matching closing bracket. And in between that, we have the words hello world with quotation marks around them. Once we're done typing that in, we can press enter to run. And the output below the prompt will just be the value that we had inside the brackets of the print function. It's helpful to think of computer programs as similar to cooking recipes. For example, you might have a recipe for a peanut butter and banana sandwich, and you might say, if you wanted to be quite verbose, first get 2 slices of bread, then spread peanut butter on 1 slice, then slice the banana and layer on top of the peanut butter, etc. Right? And you might say, well, this is sort of excessive information for a human being to create a peanut butter and banana sandwich. Maybe you could just tell most people to make a peanut butter and banana sandwich and they'd figure it out by themselves. But actually, if this was the information you're providing to a computer program, it might not be enough information because computers require us to be very precise and explicit about what we want the computer to do. They can't infer missing details in the same way that humans can. You may well find this when you start programming, in that it's very easy to make small typos in the code you type in, and R can't infer what you actually meant to type in. For example, here on the left is the program we just wrote. And on the right are three incorrect versions. In the first version, we're missing the closing quotation marks after hello world. These quotation marks indicate where the words that we want to print out start and end. So if we don't have it at the end of those words, R doesn't know where they end, right? It doesn't know whether this closing bracket should be the closing bracket of the print function or really just part of this series of letters and symbols that we want to print out. We could, in fact, as in the second example, miss both quotation marks, right? Then R doesn't know that this is words we want to print out. It thinks it's some other symbols that we might have in the programming language. And so that would also give us an error. Take a minute and just look at this third example, see if you can figure out what the problem is. You might notice that we accidentally have typed in two opening brackets here, whereas we only have one closed bracket at the end here. We don't need the second of these opening brackets. And R always expects that if your code contains an opening bracket, somewhere it should also contain a closing bracket. In general, we also want the correct number of pairs of brackets, right? We don't need two pairs here, we just need one pair. So it's very easy to have small typos. It's very common to accidentally create typos when you're typing code in. And part of getting better at programming with practice is being able to spot these more and more easily and figure out what you need to do to fix any bugs in your code. But that's something that you will get better at as you practice coding more and more.